Well, here's an old friend of the show. This is Karen Pincombe. Now, Karen, you were one of the first guests that was ever on the show about a year ago when it first started. And you're a retired school teacher. You're on the board of the London Food Bank. Your husband is Brian, who works at the London Food Bank. But you've also, started a program decades ago called Arts for All Kids. Now, that's part of the food bank. You hold it at the food bank. And I think, although this show is usually about food and it's called Food Bites, the idea of food insecurity and poverty, I think is important for things that are outside of that as well. You think of things like housing, that's been so important lately, right, for people, but also food, that's true as well, but also just the general atmosphere that kids have. I was just reading a thing that in Nova Scotia, 1 out of every 4 kids is food insecure.
Yes, I saw that this morning.
That's pretty terrible. So that also limits them from other choices. And I know you were very aware of that all those years ago. When did Arts for All Kids first start? What was your motivation for it? And can you just kind of describe how it evolved over the years?
In the summer of, 1988, I had a summer job where actually working for the Salvation Army at a camp. And for 4 weeks, there was 100 different kids who were brought to the camp. They called them fresh air kids, but they were really underserved children who would not get an opportunity to go to camp. My job was the music director. And so in 7 days, the 100 kids and I were supposed to, at the end of it, produce a musical. And so I wasn't the first person to do that job, so I was glad someone showed me the way. But during those 4 weeks, each time we had a group of kids, there were some really significant moments for me. One was we had a talent show. They could do whatever they liked on a Thursday night. And then a lot of them sang and danced. Some of them were like comedians and very funny. And every Thursday night, I was in tears realizing that they had an opportunity at camp that would disappear when they went home. And there would be no chance for them to access lessons because they came from homes where there was just not enough money to do that. A lot of them, they ate 3 meals a day at that camp because they were at camp, but they would go home and maybe get 2, maybe. And so that was part of it. And also there was actually one particular child who arrived, and I honestly thought she was going to get sent home because her behavior was not great. But she auditioned for the lead of the show. And I went to the camp director and I said, I have a problem because she's auditioning. And then there was this other child who was hands down so talented. And I said, so he's like a natural. And he said, why are you considering her? I said, because I think she needs it more than he does. But he said, so what's the problem? I said, well, I'm afraid she's going to get sent home and I won't have a lead. So anyway, he would not help me with the decision. And he said, you're just going to have to decide if you're going to take a risk with this child. So I gave her the lead, and I gave the other child. Actually, he loved it because he got to play the king who was always having a temper tantrum. And instantly, and I mean instantly, this child had a personality change. She arrived for her first session with me, giggling. She tripped up these few steps into the rehearsal hall, and I thought, oh, here it comes. The air is going to be blue. And she just went, oh, I'm so clumsy. And all of a sudden, this little girl was standing in front of me. And my university roommate was with me at the camp, and I couldn't stop talking about her. And I said, just because someone said, here, and I've always been a big believer in the arts. And so when I came home, I kept talking about this and wouldn't it be great for kids to have this kind of opportunity? And actually, it was you that said, why don't you stop talking and just do something? So I said, well, how do I start? And we talked about it. So we moved my grandmother's piano into the basement of the food bank then, in amongst the crates of food. And
I remember that. Yeah.
And a friend said, I'll do it with you. So, and then when I was volunteering, I would ask people if their kids would be interested in piano lessons. And the first, 6 families said, no, why would I want to do that? But after that, and it was mostly families who were new to Canada. And so we started with 6 children, and my friend would have 3 of them upstairs and do theory games and singing songs. And we did a lot of We did a lot of singing with them because they were trying to learn English. And then three of them, three little bums on a bench in the basement having a piano lesson all at the same time. But within a year, we had 24 kids. Mm. And then we needed more space, so we were temporarily housed in a church down the street from the food bank. And then it just became, we needed to come home, and you opened the door and said, you're already part of the food bank, just come home. And we've been with the food bank ever since. And now we service, and then people started appearing, so it wasn't just piano. Somebody called me, the first person said, I'm a poet, and I would like to teach your kids poetry. And I thought, well, this should be interesting, which shows my ignorance in that. The kids loved her, absolutely loved her. She'd come through the door and they'd yell, the poetry lady is here, and run up the stairs. We had odd one-offs. My hairdresser was really interested. She came in one Saturday and did their hair. Every kid. And it kind of made me nervous because she cut some of their hair. And I was like, okay, we didn't tell the parents this was happening. But the kids were just, they were so happy. And then somebody appeared, said, I'd like to do visual art. And so I just kept saying yes to what we could. And all of a sudden the kids were getting exposed to things that they hadn't had, this kind of thing. But the biggest thing was that they were getting lessons outside of school. Yeah. Yeah. And I got a call from a teacher, one particular friend of mine, and he just said, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? So there were two particular little girls in the program. And he said, so these two little girls, the best I can say is they're not nice little girls. But all of a sudden, they have done a 180, and we have been racking our brains trying to figure out what has changed. And he said, they're coming into my room and asking for manuscript papers so they can sit on the tarmac at recess and draw music notes. Mm-hmm. That they're asking me to practice piano in my room. He said the only thing that we can find that has changed in their lives is that they're coming to your program. Yeah.
So I spent the first 5 years of my life in Scotland, and it was after World War II, and my dad was Canadian, my mom was Scottish. They met during the war, they got married then, and then my dad was badly wounded and was sent back home to convalesce in Canada. So I didn't see him for the first 5 years of my life, but I remember coming over with Mom from Scotland, and just in time to get into grade 1, and I had a heavy brogue, Scottish brogue, and everybody was always making fun of me. It was very difficult for me to settle in. And then I remember for the next few years being highly introverted. My mom had to go and speak to teachers and stuff. And then they did a Christmas play at the school, the elementary school, Wildwood Elementary in Calgary. And I got the job as the doctor who had to come in and take care of Santa Claus. And I didn't have all that many lines, but I remember I came out, and I remember my very first line was, well, what's the matter here? So I hammed it up the absolute best I could. And the place just broke right up. And I remember that to this day is probably the first time that I realized I was able to get outside of myself. And other people were recognizing me for that. My family wasn't well off. It was difficult in Calgary in those days, and I was very much aware that I wasn't in on the other things the way that other kids were. But then by the time I got into high school and high school plays like Oklahoma, the Mikado, South Pacific, I really found myself in those times, and yet my economic status had not changed. Mm-hmm. But somehow I had come together. Mm-hmm. And if it hadn't have been, I think, for music, that would not have happened. My mom was very musical, so was my dad, but I was never really able to pursue that because they couldn't afford lessons or those kind of things. And then I remember when you first talked to me about, bringing in kids from more marginalized families in London who couldn't afford lessons or whatever it is. I took to that right away, Karen, because I understood what a difference that made to me. What's your view of that as a teacher? I mean, you were a teacher for a lot of years, and now you're still doing Arts for All Kids. But is it your sense, is it the same? The kids come alive when they discover themselves and their own creative opportunities. You're there when it happens. But do you sometimes pick up that moment when it happens, or is it just more of a general awareness?
Some kids, it's a gradual thing, but whatever school I taught in, and I do see it in Arts for All Kids, you can see when they they find quote their people, or they discover that there's a new way to communicate, and they feel better about themselves. As a teacher, my philosophy always was that to get as many kids involved as possible, but also to teach them that through the arts, things that we need in our citizens now. So working together, taking a risk, shoring up the weak link. So instead of like teasing or making fun of a child who's having difficulty getting to what we need to do, you need to come alongside. I saw kids take a leadership role and come in with their friends, say, I'll come and practice with you. Or kids who, I was telling a story yesterday about a little girl who wanted the lead in a show I was doing, very, very shy. And unfortunately, in the audition, she could barely get the words out. It was so quiet. And her mom happened to work with me. And I said, I know she wants this and I can't give it to her, but I promised to give her a moment. And she's the kind of kid that I always waited for. So for 6 months, we worked on her yelling one line, "It's a raid." And it was quiet. And the cast was, they were very supportive of her. And 2 weeks before the show, I thought, this is going to be the quietest yelling we're ever going to hear. And all of a sudden in rehearsal, she just screamed out, "It's a raid." And the whole cast burst into applause.
Great. Yeah.
So those moments are so important for kids on both sides.
It's funny because when you look at food, and you know this because you've been on the board for some time of the food bank since the beginning, and we talk about food and kids, and if they don't get proper nutrition, it affects their sleeping patterns, their retention, all of those kind of things. That's why school breakfast programs and things like that are so important. But we don't necessarily see that. We know about that from research and other things, and then we catch it on certain occasions. But the same is true of their emotional diet, right? I really think that for me, it took me years to recover from those early years, but I would have to think that the ability to be able to find something of value in yourself that other people can see and do, whether it's sports or it could be, something in music or drama or writing or whatever. It's such an important moment, and yet we often don't see that. And I know schools are having so much trouble these days that they're often cutting a number of those programs where kids emotionally find that fulfillment.
Yes.
Now, if we took food away from them, we would know right away there's going to be problems. But when we take the emotional side away from them, it's not what we would prefer, but we sometimes forget what effect that can have on kids. I know that you have seen that, you've spoken out about that in the past, but I really think it's a wonderful thing for the food bank to have somebody like you and your husband, Brian, from your own musical background, that you've got all these great volunteers that help. You're helping those kids to be able to find that emotional completion within themselves. How about the parents, though? I remember at that Christmas show, my parents were shocked. I was like a whole new kid when they saw that. What about the parents who bring the kids to Arts for All Kids? It's at the food bank when you do it. How do they react overall?
We have fantastic parents. They're very grateful. You can see that they really want to provide this kind of opportunity for their children. It's just out of their grasp. And they understand that we believe that our role is to pull alongside them and say, we can help with that. And if a family is struggling to put food on the table or to just make ends meet, there is no money for those other things that we believe the arts are a growing up necessity. And it is true that within society, there's a little bit of a disconnect. Everybody, I believe in the arts, and that's fine. But when times get tough, the first thing they do is say that the arts are a frill.
Yeah.
And it's especially for children, they are not. And especially after COVID, to have the opportunity to express themselves, because we don't know all of the emotions that are inside. But to dance it off, or to do it, to be in a drama class and be able to become another character, or to be in visual art and create a piece of art that we have had children draw things for us that we became concerned about. Because we went, whoa. And then it just made us more aware of not necessarily having to do something, but that we needed to give extra special, gentle attention to that child. The little girl that was doing poetry and had a picture from a National Geographic magazine. And when I looked at it, she was 7. And all of a sudden I realized it was very dark, but it had sunlight through the trees. And I thought, oh, it's a forest. And then I realized it was a graveyard. And I said to her, wow, that's an amazing picture. I said, honey, why did you, and she picked it. I said, so why did you choose that picture? And she looked at me like I was completely stupid and said, because people cry when someone they love dies. And I had to leave the room because I looked at these big brown eyes and I didn't know what, and I said, that's very true, honey. And I had to leave because I was going to cry. But the poetry teacher heard it and immediately sat down beside her and say, so tell me what you're thinking when you're writing your poetry about this. Like there was just an opportunity just to share. And through something, unobtrusive. And I think in our schools and outside of our schools, there are studies now that are showing the impact, not just of the arts in school, but of extracurricular lessons. And the change that makes for kids in their lives. So I think both are very important. I met with some teachers from the Thames Valley Board last week, and we had a big discussion about that. And they are all arts teachers, and they understand the need to provide, to try to find ways to at least show their kids there's an opportunity outside of what they are already doing, which is phenomenal. So I think it's a different kind of expression, and in a lot of ways it's safer language. So
Aaron, how many volunteers do you have, and what sector do they come from?
Do you mean socioeconomic, or are you talking about
No, just like, are they teachers themselves? Are they musicians?
We have a variety of folks. So we have high school students, and usually with our high school students, they come to get their volunteer hours and they don't leave because they fall in love with the kids. We have university students. Many of them are either headed into a serving career. I get lots of potential doctors and dentists and nurses, a lot of medical people, lawyers, future lawyers, and they as well come and stay. But they're there to be part of the community, but to share some passion. And all of them have the same story about how they were able to have lessons and how important that was to them. And then they meet the kids, and the kids are so excited. And then we have people who are just from the community. Most of them are artists of an avocation. So this is a passion they have, but it's not necessarily how they make their living. We've had retired teachers. We currently have 2 retired teachers who are phenomenal. So there's a wide range of them, and they stay connected. And actually, it was kind of fun. Brian and I got invited to a wedding of one of our volunteers, and she's just always stayed connected to the program. And brought her sister and her cousins and everything. So it's they come from. We now have volunteers who are new to Canada, which is becoming more important because our demographic is changing. We're getting far more families that are new to Canada, so the language barrier is sometimes an issue. So that's helpful to us to have somebody who can speak Spanish and say, okay, can you help me here? Because I want to make sure mom and dad know what's happening. So. Yeah. Is
it hard to do these kind of lessons? Like, what is it that you teach the kids? What disciplines?
I guess we're kind of loosey-goosey. It's not like school where it's a prescribed curriculum. We usually talk to the volunteers and ask what their passion is. So in the visual art room, one year we had a lead teacher who was a painter and a sketch artist. And so she taught the kids how to sketch. This year we had one online art class, and they taught them how to draw anime. The kids were beside themselves with excitement. But we also have painters. In the dance studio, we have one teacher who we currently stream in, and ballet is her forte. So she teaches ballet. Another student, it's jazz, hip hop. The kids all want hip hop. So there's a little bit of hip hop in there. The drama is about acting skills more than putting on a show, although they usually get to do some little play. But they do a lot of trust games and getting to know you. And there's a lot of, it's the loudest room we have, a lot of laughter, a lot of cheery things. The piano, the violin, and the guitar are a little more prescribed. The piano, we follow the Fletcher beginner book and then take the kids through the steps, and they get a sticker on a sheet of paper for every piece that they accomplish. Our violin teacher has her own program that starts the kids from beginning. It's Suzuki based. And in the guitar, we really try to do chord structure so that the kids can have the immediate ability to play their guitar and sound good.
Yeah.
The main thing is success.
Yeah.
So, and we don't, some people think we should push them to do more, but our real goal is for them to enjoy it. And we keep our eyes out for that kid who becomes completely dedicated. And we have tried to find people to support those kids, the dancer or the pianist or the violinist, and see what we can do beyond what is offered in the program.
Yeah. So you have to resource all of this somehow. So, I mean, you're able to do it all at the food bank each week, which is great. We don't charge you rent or anything, but you've got to pay for all of these other amenities that come along with those kind of disciplines. And I know that one of the things that you use for doing that, and Londoners have been very generous that way in supporting Arts for All Kids along with organizations. But I know that, and I see the poster behind you there, but every year you do this thing called, I presume you put it there on purpose. But
I did.
You do this thing called Broadway with a Twist. Now that's coming up shortly, but just before you get into what it is, can you just give us the date and then we'll repeat it at the end?
It's Sunday, May 28th at 7:30 at Wolf Performance Hall, and tickets are available through the Arts for All Kids website, which is just arts4allkids.ca. Yeah. And you just scroll down and look for Broadway with a Twist, and you can get your tickets. And we would love to have more people come.
Yeah. Well, we'll be there, and I'll put that information here on the screen, but I do know it's not Broadway. It's Broadway with the Twist. So yes. You have all sorts of different little things that go on that are totally unexpected, and I can see that the performers themselves, who are adults from different sectors, are really... they're quite engaged. I mean, they love doing these things in a different way. How does it work? How did you come up with that, and how does it work for the performers?
Well, I actually had seen in New York, Brian and I have been in New York to see some shows, and we happened to be there when they do Broadway Cares, which is a fundraiser throughout the theater community, and they raise funds, but they sometimes have big shows, and they would do this, they didn't call it Broadway with a Twist. I can't remember what they called it, but all the money raised went towards, for a long time, as AIDS research. Sometimes it goes to the fund for when actors get sick and need financial support. But saw some of these videos on YouTube. I just thought it was hilarious. Mm-hmm. And I'd always thought that would be so much fun because I'd never seen that happen here. So I won't get into the whole story of how it kind of came about, but I went to Brian and I said, so what do you think about this? Because this is totally dependent on him. Since he's our music director, he does all the arrangements, he creates the program. It's really, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So he went, yeah, because he loves Broadway and he loves it's his hobby, loves to arrange music. And then we started asking local performers who do a lot of community theater musicals. And we also picked people who we know nobody can not sing, because to do this, to go through a night of, wow, that was really terrible, would not be fun. Mm-hmm. So they get to sing solos that they would never normally be allowed to sing. So they're the wrong gender or they're the wrong age for the show that it's in. Or Brian takes a number and it's supposed to be a solo, but he turns it into an ensemble number. Sometimes it's just not right. Depending, and Brian actually tailors it to the singers that we have performing with us. So the pieces are picked very carefully. This year, we're really excited. Again, we have 3 kids who are attached to the program. They're teenagers now. So we have 2 who came through. We tried just before COVID to do a musical theater program. Now, at the moment, we've got that on pause because COVID kind of affected that one. But those 2 kids are in the show. And another one who we found out, we were able to find a scholarship for her to pursue some dance lessons. Yeah. So we have one of our kids who's going to be in the booth with me handling all the lights. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting to have them, but we have people like Denise Pelly and Saidat, and we have every age range we can. We have Katie Clark is joining us this year. She is just phenomenal. Her dad, Don Clark, has been our conductor for years, and so it's so nice to have the family connection. But
give me an example of a twist. Like, well, what's one of the numbers, and how do you kind of mix that up to make it entertaining?
There is, oh boy. So the opening number is Lot of Living to Do, which is supposed to be a duet, but it turns into an ensemble number. There is You Made Me Love You,
Yeah.
which is supposed to be an older gentleman, but we have someone singing it who is younger. We have, what are the girls singing?
But sometimes you have a man singing a woman's part, vice
Yes.
versa.
Yes.
All of those different kind of shaking it up all through the course of the program. Pretty
And
fun.
sometimes, my favorite one in the years past, it's everybody's favorite, was a song called Party Dress. It's supposed to be a woman pretending to be a 5-year-old girl, but it was one of our guys, and he was in a satin dress, and he's with his beard, and he brought the house down because he did the most amazing 5-year-old girl I've ever seen, and he had so much fun. So it was just completely unexpected, and that would be an example of, wow, that was just kind of wrong, but it's so much fun. And there are other times where the song, Brian changes the meaning of the song because it's out of context of the song, the show. There was one year, and boy, I can't pull the name of the song out, but it was a duet. And instead of it being a couple, it was one of our female performers, Bronwyn Wass, and she was singing, and she caught sight of the child she'd given up for adoption. And so one of our younger, and it was just heart-wrenching to watch this, and they see each other for the first time.
Yeah.
So there are moments like that. We have, I don't want to give away everything, but there's so much fun with it. People laugh, people cry, but mostly people just have a really good time. And usually they're really astounded at the level of talent that exists in London.
Yeah.
And they also show my kids that this isn't just an opportunity for now. This is something that can be part of your life for the rest of your life. Yeah. It doesn't matter socioeconomically, you can be involved in the arts, and your life can have more meaning.
Yeah. So it's been months in the making. I know you've been practicing. I've hardly seen you. You and Brian have been practicing so much. And give us the date and the time again. It's at the Wolf Theatre in the Central Library. What's the date?
It's May 28th, 7:30 p.m.
7:30 p.m. I'll put the Arts for All Kids website here that people
Excellent.
can contact them.
Yeah, I hope they come. They won't regret it. They get an amazing night's entertainment, and and any proceeds from the program, 100% of the proceeds from the program go to Arts for All Kids. Everybody is donating their time. No one involved in the show or our program is paid. It's all volunteer, and that's amazing in and of itself. So.
And for us as a food bank, I mean, it's one of the key things. I mean, we've been around 37 years. Arts for All Kids has been, 34?
We've just finished 34 years.
Yeah. So you've been with us from the beginning, but it's because we as a food bank, we realize it's more than about food. Kids can need food, that's really true, but they need these kind of things that you're giving. And we're very much aware of that as a food bank, even though we basically center on food. Arts for All Kids has given us that chance to move into a deeper area where these emotional needs are. And I think you and Brian have been just the best for us in that way, Karen. So thank you for doing that. I'm looking forward to being there that evening. It's going to be awesome. And I know that you'll just be awesome as you always are. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for all the work you've done for over 3 decades for these families. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for the chance to just share. I really appreciate it.
That's great. Thanks, Karen.
Bye.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.